Hello and welcome to the Newcastle Property Licence Virtual Training. This is the property management section of the training, and we will cover what you need to know to effectively manage your property and comply with your property licence. My name is Emma Knowles, and here with me today is Danny McNulty, and we both work with Private Rented Service Newcastle. Some of you might have already been to our training, our landlord forums and landlord conferences in the past, and it's our first time providing updates virtually. We understand this is quite a different experience from face-to-face meetings, and after watching this video you might still have some questions. We would welcome anyone who still needs to know a little bit more to contact us, and our contact details will be available at the end of the slides. So what are we going to cover in this session? We're going to look at why property management is so important. We're going to cover references and how you choose your tenants. We're going to look at tenancy agreements. We're going to take some time to look over deposit protection and taking of deposits. We'll look at the certificates that you need to provide. We'll consider what you need to include in your Tenants Pack at the start of the tenancy. We'll look at recognising and managing antisocial behaviour in your tenancies. And we'll look at training requirements under property licensing. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to my colleague Danny, who'll start the presentation.
So, when you're thinking about letting your property out, you spend a great deal of time thinking about the actual property. You're thinking about the price, and you'll think about what you need to actually adapt to comply with legislation, as well as the licensing scheme. And whilst all these things are really important, it's then often easy to forget about the actual tenancy. Tenancy management is just as important as building management, and spending some time to think about the maintenance side of things will really help you out later on down the line. In the long term, poor management can lead to a whole host of issues, from increasing the likelihood of damage and rent arrears right through to increasing the turnover and the void periods of your tenancies. All of this costs you money. This is why it's really important to think about your business plan well in advance. So as part of this, you should be thinking really carefully about the kind of tenant you're looking for, as well as what their expectations are going to be. For instance, will they be expecting furniture and appliances, and are you actually able to provide these? You should consider the rent you're asking for and whether or not you'll need a guarantor. And you should also consider whether or not you intend on doing all of the day-to-day management yourself, or if you're going to find an agent to do this for you. The whole point of this is to then think about what your responsibilities are as a landlord. At this point, you should be thinking about whether or not you plan on being a landlord for a longer term investment, or whether or not you're going to be very reliant on the month-to-month rent. Considering all of this, it'll give you a good basis to plan for any issues. That way you can avoid making any last-minute decisions. Even outside of licensing, it's really important to make sure you carry out full referencing, and you might be asked to provide proof that you've done so. It's essential to know who your tenants are, as well as who'll be living with them, and you should ensure that you're carrying checks out on anybody over 18 who'll be living within the property. These checks should include requesting their current as well as their previous addresses, with a view of obtaining a 3-year history. You can then decide to do with what you want with that information, and it's possible you might even still want to offer the tenancy even if it comes with a bad reference. But at least if you've got the information, you'll be prepared for any future issues, and you can go and work out a bit of a plan with the tenant to combat these issues. You should also make sure you've seen proof of ID and have taken adequate copies of these. This ties in with your right to rent checks as well, so you should be keeping hold of these for the full length of the tenancy. At this point, it's a really good idea to do an affordability check with your tenant. This way you can make sure that the property is actually affordable, and it'll help lessen the chance of rent arrears later on down the line.
Danny, can I just jump in there? What if I can't get any references for the tenants? For example, it's their first time living away from home, or maybe it's the students?
If you can't get any references, that is understandable. We do know that people sometimes don't have a housing history, like if they've lived with their parents for their whole life. You should just try and collect whatever information you can. Perhaps if they're a student, you could get a reference from the university, and just, if you're asked to provide references, just supply whatever information you have managed to find.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Even at this point, you found the perfect property and you found your perfect tenant. We now need to think about the paperwork side of things. So one of the most important documents that you've got is your tenancy agreement. So it's really important to make sure that you get this right first time. You should make sure your tenancy agreements are robust, but they're also very clear and easy to read and understand. This should detail the exact rent amount as well as the frequency of payment and the length of the agreement. You should also consider the length of the agreement as to how long you want the tenancy to run for initially. There should be information relating to the deposit in your tenancy agreement as well as the right and responsibilities of both parties. You should also make sure that you include in your contact details as well as that of your management agent if you're using one. It's really important at this point to make sure that the contact number is a UK number. If you don't have a UK contact number, then you should be thinking about employing a management agent within the UK.
Okay. What would happen if I don't have a tenant yet? Do I need to send you a signed tenancy agreement?
No, not necessarily. If you don't have a copy of the actual tenancy agreement, you can just send us a blank copy that would be the same as the one that you'd be using.
Thank you.
Touched briefly on the deposits, and I hope everybody's well aware of how important the protection of your deposit is. If you take a deposit, you must have this protected. It needs to be protected in one of the 3 government schemes, and then you have to provide proof of that to the tenant. You must provide them with the full prescribed information at every interval where you take a deposit, whether this is the creation of a new tenancy agreement or the renewal of an existing one. So there's 2 types of schemes. There's the custodial scheme. These schemes will hold disputed monies and landlords will have to provide proof of reason for retention. The emphasis here is on the landlord. And then there are the insurance-backed schemes as well. Here the landlord continues to hold the deposit and the tenant must contact the deposit protection scheme and follow the guidance. This way the emphasis is on the tenant. At the end of the tenancy, you should return the deposit within 10 days. If there are any issues for which you wish to withhold part or all of the deposit, then you and the tenant should agree the amount and why. You should then provide the reasons in writing. If you still can't agree, then the relevant party will need to contact the deposit protection scheme to advise of the dispute. So next, we're looking at the certificates. These must be given at the start of any new tenancy. You must provide in-date copies of your CB12 as well as your APC, and you must now also ensure that you've provided a copy of your electrical safety certificate. As well as these certificates, it's important that you provide in the latest copy of the How to Rent leaflet. You should also provide any copies of PAT testing that's been carried out, as well as a copy of your DBS if you have one. As it's vital that you provide copies of your APC, CP12 and How to Rent, we would advise that you have something drawn up to ask the tenant to sign receipt of these. You can either draw up a separate document or incorporate into your tenancy agreement or even into an inventory, just whichever works best for you.
Can I just pop in there again? The requirement to have an electrical safety certificate is still quite new and I haven't had mine done yet. What happens if I don't have my electrical safety certificate ready?
We do understand at the minute that not everybody's going to have them done in time. If you don't have your certificate in place yet, just submit your application as normal and then contact us and let us know and we can agree a plan for how and when you're going to have this in place.
Thank you.
So when you've got to this point, you've got a lot of information to give your tenants and a lot of paperwork for them to keep safe. Therefore, we'd always recommend that you give them a full tenants pack. In it, you should include your tenancy agreement, your inventory, and any certificates you've got. You should also include any information regarding the property, for instance, how to report repairs and where the rubbish goes, as well as when the bins are collected. If you've got it, you should provide a copy of your antisocial behaviour policy or how they can report it. You should also include copies of any manuals or user guides that you've got as well. Doing this may be quite a bit of work at the beginning, but this way you ensure that they have all of the information. It gives a really good foundation to your tenant and should help with those little niggling issues that arise at the beginning of just about every tenancy. It also demonstrates your professionality as well. Most of this information is what will help you when it comes to writing your management statement too.
Danny, many landlords haven't written a management statement before. Is there a template they can use or anywhere they can get some help with this?
Yeah, definitely. We don't have a template, but what we can do is you can contact us and we can talk you through what needs to go in your actual management statement. We can take a look over it and make sure that you've included everything that needs to go in, and we can send you a bit of a breakdown as well as to what needs to be in there.
Thank you. I'm sure that will be helpful.
Out of all of the things that we've covered during this training, this is probably one of the most important. Antisocial behaviour is one of the biggest causes of dissatisfaction amongst low demand areas. It's something that not only causes issues for yourself as a landlord, but it has a huge detrimental effect on the surrounding community. You can do your bit to help with this. First, start where you're referencing and understand who your tenant is, as well as how you're going to manage the tenancy. For instance, managing a student-let is going to be massively different to managing a family home, and this is why you should consider your surroundings, as well as who your tenant is and how well they'll fit in with the rest of the community. So in order to do this, you should make sure you've got a strong clause in your tenancy agreement, and you should be contactable. Think about how you'll know there's a problem. Can the tenant contact you? Do you know the neighbours in the area? If not, it's likely that problems will be reported to the police or the council. So do we have an up-to-date contact number for you? At the beginning, at the very least, you should have regular visits. Not only will it give you a chance to spot any problems early on, but it'll give you the opportunity to develop good working relationships with your tenants. And this will allow you to challenge behaviour more effectively later on down the line. If you do receive a report of antisocial behaviour, take it seriously. Try and ascertain its authority and encourage whoever reported it to you to also report it to the council or even the police if it's something that's involving criminal behaviour. Talk to your tenant about the concern that you've received, listen to them and ensure they understand the consequences of antisocial behaviour. You should be firm and boundaried following through on any consequences you've spoken about. If you're still struggling to manage the behaviours, you can approach the council, the police and request support from us.
Earlier you mentioned early interventions being one of the best tools. What would early intervention look like?
So early intervention would be just getting involved at the earliest opportunity. So for instance, the very first complaint that you receive, go straight in and have a conversation with your tenant. The first issue that arises, go straight in there. Work out a plan with them moving forward as well and what's acceptable and what's unacceptable.
It can be quite challenging for landlords to manage antisocial behaviour on their own. What support would they get from the council?
Well, if you're not too sure what you're doing, or maybe if you just need a bit extra support, give us a phone down at the private rented service. We can go through what the issues are, we can go through what the possible options are of where you can go. We can even have a conversation with the tenant. If perhaps they need some additional support, we can refer them for it.
Thank you. And the contact details to get in touch with us would be at the end of this presentation, aren't they?
They are, yeah, thank you for that. So as part of our accreditation service, as well as the licensing requirements, you must complete 5 hours of continuous professional development. This can include forums and meetings, our landlord conference, as well as this training course and some other online courses. This is important for 2 reasons. First, it keeps you up to date with any potential or development changes in the world of being a landlord. There have been many changes of late, and it's really easy to miss something that could have some consequences later on down the line. It could even prevent you from being able to save notices later on down the line. Secondly, being a landlord can be really isolating, so it's important to network and meet other landlords to share experience and best practice. This way you can get some real support and even just know that you're not alone in experiencing whatever issues you are experiencing.
How would a landlord go about proving that they've completed their 5 hours of training?
Once you've completed any training, whether or not it's this course or attending any of the NRLA webinars, anything like that, just drop us an email and let us know. And like Emma said, the contact details are at the end of this presentation.
Thank you.
So if you've ever been on our website, you'll see that there's a lot of information on there. We've got copies of letters to tenants, we've got copies of handouts and property logs, as well as rent schedules. By using these, especially the logs, you can keep track and spot any issues early on. So they'll provide you with a really good record and evidence should you need it. And as a final note, you should also make sure that you have the proper landlord insurance.
The property log sounds like a good idea. What sort of information should a landlord be keeping in there?
Really anything that has anything to do with the property, so any concerns that you've received, any complaints from neighbours, any issues that the tenant might be having. If, for instance, you're getting reports of disrepair, you can schedule if there's any missed visits or anything like that. You can all keep a log of all of them within the property log.
That sounds useful, thank you. So, as well as the toolkit, I mentioned before providing support. You aren't alone as landlords, and we are here to offer support and help to both you and the tenant. We provide support at all points of your journey, from the beginning of getting your property ready to market, to help with ending a tenancy if it needs to be. If you're finding it difficult to get your property up to accreditation standards, we can advise you on that, and we have a small grant of up to £200 available to help you reach that standard. We can help you advertise a property and find a tenant, and we also offer a referencing service. The referencing service is quite thorough. It includes 5 years housing history checks, including utilising council references, and if necessary we can also carry out police checks. We can provide support to both you and the tenant to maintain the tenancy at every step along the way. So if you're having problems with rent arrears or getting access to carry out repairs, or as we mentioned before, receiving complaints of antisocial behaviour and noise, you can get in contact with us and we would work with you to help support you and the tenant maintain that tenancy. In addition to that, you might want to consider joining some professional bodies and attending some landlords forums. There are both national and local bodies that you might be interested in getting involved with, or you can sign up for newsletters and bulletins. Private Rented Service offer a monthly news bulletin which you can sign up to and receive free at the end of every month, and this includes updates both locally and nationally. Okay, so we've reached the end of the presentation, and I do hope you've been able to take away something useful with you. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us. If you haven't already, please feel free to visit our website where you can find the Landlord's Toolkit. The website is available at www.privaterentedservice.co.uk. If you have any questions, either about the training that you've heard today or would like some help and advice in getting your management standards ready, please do not hesitate to contact us on privaterentedservice@newcastle.gov.uk. Before you go, we have 2 other videos available for you to look at. These look at property licensing as well. One of them looks at property standards, while the other looks at the actual online application process itself. I hope you found this video useful, and thank you very much for taking the time to join us today.